Hi, everybody. It's Plastic coming in from Melbourne, Australia. Let me tell you, I've got Debbie Gendler with us. She's a fantastic author. Now, this book is going to be released tomorrow. And what a fantastic time. The book's called I Saw Them Standing There. How are you today, Debbie?
I'm great, thank you.
Now, tell me about this fantastic new book, because last time we spoke, the stuff you told us was fascinating about the Beatles and Brian Epstein. That
Okay.
blew my mind away. So tell me about
Uh,
this new book and how long it took to put together.
uh, well, I started writing the book 9 years ago. It took me 9 years to finish because, of course, I had full-time work and I pretty much just wrote on Sundays or long weekends, whatever. And the book chronicles all my different adventures that I had with the Beatles, starting at age 13 when I received an album as a gift from family friends who traveled to England. And they brought it back to me. I was living in New Jersey at the time, and they brought me the album back as a gift. And the minute I saw them on the cover, I fell in love. I hadn't even heard the music yet. And I thought these were the cutest four guys I'd ever seen. But I couldn't interest any of my friends in them when I started playing the music. No one, I mean, they hadn't been on American Bandstand or they couldn't hear their records on the radio. So for them, they weren't really that interested. So as a result, what happened is that inside, though, there was a little notice in the receipt about the Beatles fan club in England. So I wrote a letter and waited. And that was like in early May of 1963. I heard nothing till October, right at Halloween. And I received a telegram at home from a lawyer in New York City asking if I would come to a meeting at his office because he was working with the Beatles and their management, their executives, I think it said, were coming to New York, and uh, they were looking for someone to be a fan who could get other fans to be present when the Beatles arrived. So my mom called and she was kind enough to arrange a meeting. And about 10 days later, my dad drove me to New York City, where I met the lawyer. Excuse me, where I met the lawyer. Walter Hoffer was his name. But also there were some fellows with a British accent that I thought was the most beautiful accent I have ever heard. And one was Brian Epstein, and who I believe was his friend Jeffrey Ellis, who he knew from Liverpool but lived in New York at the time, and one other fellow who I'm still not sure who that other person was. And they spoke to me about, working or doing things at fan club or getting fans because they didn't know teenagers in the New York area. And I said, sorry, I can't, I have to go to college. I can't work. But that's how I got my ticket to go be in the audience of the Ed Sullivan show, is because they sent me a ticket as a thank you for my time to come in. And I sort of seized that opportunity because, of course, we were all loving the Beatles, weren't we? And I seized the opportunity to try and ingratiate myself more and start doing some things for the club.
I've got to say something. Your story is so amazing because to have met Brian Epstein at that time before the Beatles came to America is just unbelievable because I didn't know that such a meeting existed. That's why your story is so unique. You're
Yeah.
so at the point, at the start of the takeoff before Beatlemania, which is unheard of. And as I said, your story to me is unheard of. And in hindsight, how would it have been if you'd taken their offer and started working on behalf of the Beatles from that point? I mean, I reckon that would have been a life journey. You agree, looking back?
Looking back, you know what? I'm sort of glad I did it my way. I was too young, and although I know that in like Britain, people by age 15 were out of school and working. In New Jersey, where I grew up, people at age 15 were just in high school and, weren't ready for really, we weren't prepared like British kids were prepared for the adult world. We really weren't, too coddled maybe in America. And age 15, I was like on in high school and on my way to like university afterward. But the fact that they had met me really helped me along and helped move adventures. Like other things I did on behalf of the fan club is that I got fans to camp out in Times Square for the selling of the tickets for A Hard Day's Night, to literally in Times Square in front of the Astor Theater. I arranged for other fans, including myself too, to bring sleeping bags, and we slept on the street on Broadway waiting for the sales. I mean, it was crazy. Or I did things like on behalf of the fan club, I went on a local New York TV show called The Clay Cole Show and did something called Ringo for President. It was a novelty record that was done in 1964. I think in Australia there was one version done by someone, Rolf Harris,
Yeah, that's right.
a kangaroo song of some sort, and something.
No, I think he did a song, but I think the Beatles were singing in the background, and that became like a novelty song. I think
Yeah.
Rolf Harris was doing an act, and the
Uh-huh.
Beatles were singing behind like a comedy, trying to stir him up on stage.
Okay. Okay, I knew there was something, but he sang that song
Yeah,
Ringo for President somewhere. And then there was another version in America by these kids called New World Singers that were amassed specifically for that Ringo for President 45 release. But those are the kinds of fun things that I did. And I write all about that and the details in my book of just all the fun we had. I mean, I don't know how it is in Australia, but life right now in the United States here, it's really difficult. I mean, you have groups of people and it's very divisive among the different groups and things. And in writing it, I didn't know that it would be out at this time. I hoped it would, because I always hoped it would be ready for the 60th anniversary of the Beatles coming to America. And sure enough, that is later this particular week. But I just really just wanted to do something now where, the Beatles were all about celebrating the good times in our lives, wasn't it? The music, the sentiment in the earliest years, the love we had for them, the respect we had for the group. And I really am finding in the reaction to the book now that people are all going back to the time when here in America they sat in front of the TV and watched the Ed Sullivan Show and fell in love with these four guys from Liverpool. And they did something to all of our hearts and all of our psyche, has brought some good times, after the assassination of our president
yeah.
a few months before. So I'm hoping maybe just bringing the memories back to everyone in their own lives and how they celebrate the Beatles. I mean, in talking about it, I hear from people, oh, they go and see Ringo in concert now. That's their connection to the Beatles. So even though we haven't seen the Beatles now in person, all of them really perform in decades, there's still ways that people still keep that immediate connection alive.
That's true, because it was a golden age of music and there was nothing like them. And when they came to the US, there was nothing like them. They did their own style. They came and they brought American rock and roll, their version of American rock and roll, their way, which there was nothing like it in the world. They were pioneers. They changed the culture of the youth. That's what it was. It was like the youth basically took over with their own music and their own fashions and their own, how can I say, the generation. It was their generation. It was their music. It's just an unbelievable time that's never going to be repeated. And that's like, to me, the golden age. When the Beatles hit in 64, they opened up the doors for everybody and there was nothing like them. There's no comparison because they were so unique and so talented. That's the thing. They came up from the clubs and that no one could touch them. They had that much talent and their own music style that was totally original. That's
Mm-hmm.
what it was.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The funny thing is, though, is that after I met the Beatles, excuse me, in 1965, there was a article in my local newspaper in New Jersey, and it talked about me and it showed a picture. And from that, I received hate mail from people. So there was still, even a year later, 18 months later, a whole stream of people that felt threatened by the Beatles, that, threatened by their music, threatened by the cultural changes
Yeah.
that they were bringing in our clothes and dress and way of life and youth. But I have in my book one picture that was sent to me from the newspaper, and it wrote that someone wrote, "You're nuts. What about our American boys? They're laughing at you all their way to the bank." And I thought to myself, I was worried. Here I was, 15 years old, receiving hate mail about the Beatles. And what was wrong? Why did someone need to do that? So anyway, it's just a terrible, terrible thing. I'm sorry. I should have done this. I was not, it's with the rain. We're having terrible rains here, so everyone could hear. I was busy moving my buckets around to catch the leak in my ceiling.
I know. But let me tell you, the stories that you must have so many stories now in the new book. And I mean, being able to tell that, let's say in the 60th year now this week, that's just an amazing timing. And as I said, your story is so unique. That's what makes it so fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I was just telling a friend about that. And my husband, of course, read the book and was with me through writing all the chapters. But he said something interesting to me just the other night. And he said, that I had opportunities and I seized those opportunities. He said a lot of people get opportunities and they just let them go by. And that is the difference, he said, between my book, being a Beatle fan, and a lot of other Beatle fans. I worked hard to make my opportunities. I really did. I went to the fan club. I organized my own little chapter of the fan club, and we did good things. We raised money for United Cerebral Palsy. Granted, the Beatles did a fundraising concert in New York City in September 1964 for cerebral palsy. So it gave us our idea. But what we did is we took things from the Beatles and we then turned them into good things for ourselves as fans on behalf of the Beatles. So we took a lot from them. So there were opportunities that we had and we seized them and we did something with them. And that's the difference between my story and a lot of other people who say, "Oh, I fell in love that night on the Ed Sullivan Show watching the Beatles." Well, I was fortunate. I got a ticket to sit in the audience. But the following week, when they were live from Miami, from the Deauville Hotel, I was at home in my living room, not sitting there like everyone else. And I resolved in my head, you know what? I'm going to do something. I don't want to just be sitting here watching the Beatles. I want to make a contribution to the Beatles. So I came up, what could I do? I had met these people, fortunately, because I wrote a letter, but I could have just never written the letter. I could have just passed it off and said, "Oh, my friends don't like these guys." So it's a real part of looking at your life and doing what you want to do. If you really want to do something and do something extraordinary or change it, You can do it. You just have to, you know, concentrate, strategize, and figure out what you want to do.
But what fascinates me now is you're there before this all happens in the United States. And then when Beatlemania takes off right on the Ed Sullivan show, that was the lowest crime rate on the street. There was no one in the streets at that particular time. But what I'm saying is when the Beatles hit big, everybody that thought the Beatles must have been rubbish, they must have realized that you knew what you were talking about and how great you were the pioneer to tell them about the Beatles before anyone else. And then when they saw it, they had no idea how big this phenomenon was going to be. It took
Right?
over America and the world. So
It sure
how was
did.
it after the Ed Sullivan show when your friends came up to you and said the Beatles are the greatest things in the world, and 1 minute they were saying they were rubbish?
Right. Well, you know what? After I went to the show on Sunday night, and I went home really quickly with my mother, and we drove from New York to New Jersey. I went to school the next day. It was Monday. The vice principal of my school was amongst the first adults that I saw. And he said, I watched the Beatles. Everyone sort of knew, you know, that the Beatles were beginning to really happen. One teacher knew that I had a Beatles record, and he asked me to please bring it to school because he wanted to play it for his classroom. And that was the Please Please Me album that my parents' friends brought back for me as the gift. But then everyone started to buy Meet the Beatles, you know. And when I started my chapter of the fan club, there were a lot of parents who didn't permit their daughter to join my chapter. You know, they said no, that the Beatles were bad, that they were a bad influence, that I was a bad influence. And I have to tell you, I really wasn't. I was a good student. I did my homework every night before I started to do my Beatles stuff. I didn't neglect my studies. I still walked my dog after school. You know, I did the things that I had to do. But they started to say, no, their friends can't be friends with me. When I started the club, some parents wouldn't let them join the Beatles fan club. So I took my allowance and I paid the fan club the $2 membership dues for my friends and had their mail sent to my house so that they could be part of it. You know, when I had my 50th high school reunion, we all sat around and we laughed hysterical that our parents felt threatened by the Beatles. When you look at what parents deal with today, it's like nothing. I'm so sorry.
No,
What
that's all right. We'll continue on. That's fine.
happened here? Oh my goodness. You'd think I was in a real office. I'm sitting at home, you know? Um, so anyway, I I you know, that's sort of what was going on, is that there were so many people who said no, you can't be friends with her, you can't do this, you're doing all that. My
That's
goodness.
okay. How exciting is it with the release of the book tomorrow?
I'm really excited. You know, I'm going to be doing a big book signing at the end of the week. And then I'm flying immediately to New York because there's a gathering at the Fest for Beatle fans
That's
at
right.
the TWA Hotel
Yep.
at JFK Airport. And I'm going to be doing a hour-long talk with my friend Christine Feldman Barrett. And she is going to be interviewing me. And she's a noted Beatle expert, historian, author who has, you know, written books as well on the Beatles, this topic. And she's actually also a professor. She lives in Brisbane, although American, and she's a professor of sociology there, and you know, a renowned expert. And so I'm looking forward to that, and then whatever else happens. But I have to tell you, it's a wonderful, wonderful time, and you know, we still love the Beatles and always will. And, I mean, their music will be with us forever, right?
Exactly. And I got to tell you, it's an honor doing this interview right at this particular time, one day before the book's being released. And we want everyone to go out there and buy it, the book. I saw them standing there. Of course, it's going to be in all the biggest booksellers. Just mention where the book's going to be. I take it it's going to be on Amazon straight away.
It's already on Amazon. It's been on Amazon a couple of weeks now for pre-order. And I think people who did do the pre-order will be receiving them like the day after. So by the end of the week, I think the pre-orders are already on the way. But yeah, I saw them standing there by me, Debbie Gendler, and the subtitle is Adventures of a Original Fan through Beatlemania, during Beatlemania and beyond, because my story does go well beyond just the initial part of the Beatles coming to America, and frankly ends right now because fortunately for the past 5 years I have been working part-time for Sofa Entertainment. I actually just realized when I looked at myself, I'm wearing their sweatshirt because it's so cold here in Los Angeles. And they own the Ed Sullivan Show now. And I've been there as a research consultant and working with them, not just on the Beatles though, but on the Ed Sullivan Show as a whole. So it's been just a wonderful experience, and I've met wonderful friends, and it's a great community of people that the Beatles have brought together, and it's a real sort of brotherhood of people, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I want everyone to go out and buy the book. I saw them standing there. Go out there, being released tomorrow with Australian time, what it is in American time. Before you know it, you can buy it. There's pre-orders, but as I said, go out and buy it. It should be a bestseller. And I can't thank you enough, Debbie, because this is just a fantastic interview.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And, I look forward to one day actually coming to Australia. So
Fantastic.
maybe I'll do it. So